Welcome to Franklin Covey's Lead Through Uncertainty, the podcast to help business leaders navigate the pressures of AI and unpredictable markets with bold, creative solutions. I'm your host, Patrick Ledden, and through my research and years of experience, I've studied how disruption can leave organizations in the dust if not handled properly. Over the course of 6 episodes, we will cover topics such as task prioritization, skill building, resilient cultures, and much more. Because doing what's always been done won't just hold businesses back, it could leave them behind. It's time to act different to emerge different. Today's episode is all about future-proofing your people through professional development. And our guest is FranklinCovey's very own Executive Vice President of Product and Marketing, Will Houghteling. Hey, Will, welcome to the show.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for having me on and excited for today's conversation.
Well, thanks for joining us, and I'm excited for the conversation as well. As we jump into it, I mentioned future-proof, Will. So could you define a little bit of what it means to have a future-proof mindset and why it's so critical in today's world?
Absolutely. I define having a future-proof mindset as really having a learning mindset where you are constantly thinking about the ways that the world of work is changing and the ways that your working world is changing so that your skills, abilities, mindsets can evolve with the time. We are in an era of, it feels like, unprecedented change. You have the rise of AI transforming what we do and how we do it. And I think it's essential that people develop a future-proof mindset, develop this kind of agile learning orientation so that as the world of work transforms and evolves, they are still as relevant and effective as ever before.
When you think about, okay, so if I have this mindset that I'm going to be really learning oriented or future proof oriented, are there specific skills that you start to go, okay, now you got that mindset. Now here's some essential skills that you probably need to be picking up on in order to stay competitive as things are changing so rapidly?
Yeah, so I think the first that I would focus on is just intellectual curiosity that I think people need to approach their work both at a high level, what is the goal of my job, and at a day-to-day, what do I need to do to accomplish the kind of projects, goals, tasks ahead of me, with a lot of intellectual curiosity, thinking about how things are going to evolve. So I would say intellectual curiosity is a kind of key skill in the future. I think related to that growth mindset of not being stuck in or enamored by the current status quo, but receptive to changes in the market, changes in your team, changes in your organization more broadly, receptive to the feedback that you get from peers, managers, reports. So you are constantly growing and evolving. And I think the third I would point to is comfort with technology. That I think there's a lot of people who maybe for the last few years have said to themselves, no, AI is a fad. It's actually these models hallucinate too much and it's never going to be trusted in enterprise. And they're really interesting toys, but I think, yesterday's toys become today's essentials. And I think you need to have a inclination towards partnering with technology and kind of leveraging technology to achieve more and more than ever before. So I would say those kind of three, having that intellectual curiosity, having that growth mindset, and having a bias towards partnering with technology rather than avoiding it.
It's funny, as you were saying that, Will, I was thinking about my dad. So my dad is going to be 94 in just a couple of months. And when he was probably in his late 50s or so, he'd been at the phone company for many, many years. And he was as he would say, he was in an office job at that point. And email was just starting to show up in the office space. And he had decided one day when his admin wasn't there, when his boss called looking for a response from my dad to an email, my dad decided that was the day I'm going to quit because I don't know how to use the email. This other person prints it for me and hands it to me. And I think there's a bit of a mindset out there that I bump into occasionally where people think like, oh, I can kind of wait this one out, or I'm going to retire in 5 years or 10 years. I don't need to figure this one out. I would imagine you're saying, no, you don't have 5 or 10 years to wait.
Totally. Yeah, I think that you can't be neutral on a moving train. I think that the kind of world is changing, and I think you need to embrace that change and have that be a wind at your back, and have the kind of technological change be a tailwind that amplifies the work that you do, increasing your effectiveness and efficiency, rather than something that you are flying into as a headwind.
So how about, yeah.
Oh. Oh,
No, go
maybe
ahead.
I would just add to my previous answer. I focused a lot on what are the technological changes and how do we respond to those. I also think that there's skills that were important 10 years ago, 50 years ago, they're going to be important 10 years from now. Who knows what 50 years from now will look like, but I'm really confident will still be important 10 years from now. And that is the interpersonal skills of working effectively with other people. I think that a lot of the tasks that we do every day will be automated. I think that a lot of the work that we do of building teams and inspiring others and collaborating effectively, I think will not be automated. And so I
Yeah.
think that a lot of the interpersonal effectiveness, leadership, teamship, I think those skills that have always been important will kind of be increasingly important as well.
Yeah, I was going to wonder, do you think there's an argument that can be made that those are actually going to be increasingly important because of so many other things might be automated or at least supplemented?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that a lot of I think a lot of those kind of power skills, human skills, soft skills, leadership skills, I think will be increasingly important. I think it's an interesting kind of it's an interesting flip from how we've talked a lot the last 10, 15 years, where for the last 10, 15 years, it was everyone needs to learn to code and everyone needs to get more technical and everyone needs to be a data analyst and you need to learn SQL or you need to learn, JavaScript or whatever the case may be. But I think actually the AI is really good at a lot of that technical ability. And I think it's the human abilities that are kind of increasingly important over time.
No, that makes perfect sense. Let me ask you this. So let's say, for example, that I'm listening to this conversation today and I say, all right, I get the idea that I need to be more, forward thinking, more intellectually curious, more willing to embrace technology. But I am trying to figure out, like, how do I turn the ship that is my organization's culture, that maybe they hadn't been that adapting to new technologies. And maybe even though I have it in my own mindset, I've got hundreds or thousands of other people. I mean, what do I start to do to foster a culture and start to build this at scale?
Yeah. So I'll talk kind of philosophical and practical. I think the philosophical, you need to encourage your teams to embrace the learning mindset, embrace growth mindset, embrace testing, trialing, iterating with these tools. Recognizing that not everything is going to be peaches and cream out the gate. It's not that every single experimentation or initiative is going to work, but that on balance, if you get people to adopt that learner's mindset, to adopt that growth mindset, embrace technology and whatnot, on balance over the course of many quarters, many years, you're going to get a higher performing team as a result. I think that practically you need to create time and space for people to test, to trial, to spend the hard yards learning how best to use these tools. I think in Seven Habits, we talk about the kind of time matrix. We talk about the different quadrants of work. You have important work, you have urgent work. It's often the important but not urgent work that gets systematically deprioritized. I think that a lot of what I'm discussing today, intellectual curiosity, embracing technology rather than avoiding it, developing your people leadership skills, your interpersonal collaboration skills, that is all quadrant two, that important but not urgent work. And so I would highly encourage everybody to make space for it. We as a product team, for example, our engineering team, I've been saying for the last 6 months, hey, everybody, like we need to be using AI. We need to be using AI. You see all these tools that are getting a lot of public praise, Windsurf and Cursor and Devin and these autonomous coding agents. And it was hard for people in the flow of their existing ambitious projects timelines to adopt these new tools. They felt like, oh, I'm going to have to go slow to then go fast. And so what we ultimately did was we said, we're going to take 2 days, pencils down, no day-to-day work needs to be accomplished. And we're going to have a professional development conference for people to learn intentionally how to use these tools. And it's a classic go slow to go fast. They left those 2 days with a new mindset and a new skill set that's going to allow them to be 10 to 30% more effective in the future. So I would say, like, encourage people to embrace these new mindsets, this future proofing concept, and create the space for them to do it as well.
Will, I'm curious when you did the 2 days of pencil down, which I think is, a great way to model even for the listeners as well, but also for your people. When you did that, did you find that you had some people kind of on the curve who were already adopting a lot of these things, kind of had been forward thinking themselves or future proofing in many ways themselves, and other people who were kind of laggards, or not to indict anyone in particular, right? They're all busy, they're all doing things, but did you find that kind of distribution? And if I could ask, like, where were you?
Yeah, 100%. So we found, in every product adoption curve, you have the early adopters, you have your laggards, you have everybody in between. I think we have a lot of people who have skepticism or cynicism about these tools, both about the effectiveness and the kind of long-term, almost moral implications of these tools. And so we definitely had a distribution on that product adoption curve. What we did in the 2 day pencils down kind of lead development offsite experience was we did a lot of near sharing and pair sharing where the person on the team, there's an engineer on our team, Nelson, who's done an amazing job adopting a lot of these tools and technologies. He led a 2 hour long session for his peers. So it was not a top down, hey, Will, the team leader wants everybody to do this, but it was a person on their team who has similar workflows as them, demonstrating how they use the tools. And then we gave everybody the opportunity to try using the tools. And people then reached that magic moment where they had the aha, like, wow, this is actually can be really powerful. And they felt it, didn't just see it. And that, I think, changed the mindset, which will change kind of the behaviors that they have on an ongoing basis. In terms of my own adoption, to the second part of your question, I would put myself not maybe on the bleeding edge, but at that like second group of early adopters where so I would say I'm probably leading out from in front, but not so far in front that I'm truly bleeding edge with my adoption.
I'm just curious now that we've kind of gone down to your adoption level, was there something personal for you in your career, I should say, that's kind of made you somebody who's more likely to adopt things? I mean, did you learn something earlier on in your career as a leader that's been helpful to you as this next wave of like AI, for example, is kind of really coming in?
Yeah, I think my first job right out of college, I worked at Google and YouTube for a number of years right out of college. And I found early on that employees who were kind of self-sufficient, self-reliant were more effective. That if you could learn the tools you needed to accomplish both your tasks in your work and some of the adjacent workflows, you were a lot more effective. And then other people came to you because you could combine, oh, I know how to do my job, but also I know how to use this other tool that traditionally we have to ask this other team to get help on. And so I think early on in my career, I had a proclivity to adopting tools early and often. And I think that's kind of led through. And I should say also, I think today, our conversation right now, a lot of the uncertainty is around AI. And I think it will be the big macro wave impacting the world of work for the next few years. But I think a lot of what I'm saying is also true for leadership concepts and for interpersonal work. And, so I would encourage everybody to say, pick up the leadership book or take the course, take the solution, take it particularly seriously and try to apply it in your job. And I think if you're at the forefront of that adoption and application, you're just going to be ahead of the pack, ahead of your team.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, AI is the thing we're talking about these days, but there's always going to be a thing we're talking about. And I think the sooner you get better at it, probably the better off you and your team are going to be. When you think about like change, obviously FranklinCovey has a solution in the area of change. You all have done a lot in change. You know yourself a lot about the change model and how it unfolds. But when people are listening to the podcast right now who maybe aren't as familiar with change, or they want to get it better, get it more right this time, if you will, what would you tell them about like how other people are going to face these changes in regard to like fear or concern, or what is my job going to be going forward? I mean, what would you tell them about how to, I don't want to say reassure people, but certainly how to have a good conversation with your people about, okay, it is changing, and here's how we can approach it together, and you can approach it individually as a team member.
Yeah, absolutely. So in our change course, we talk about the 4 phases of change. So you have the status quo, how things are today. The change is introduced and you have a disruption period. Then you reach this point of decision, and then you have adoption, and then ultimately innovation. I think a key part in that change curve is that things get worse before they get better. that when you are implementing some new solution that requires teams to change, organizations to change, mindsets to change, et cetera, you will have a difficult period, and do not give up. Don't feel like, oh man, it's not working immediately. I'm going to get impatient and I'm going to kind of move on to the next initiative. Then you're just kind of jumping from change curve to change curve and never actually seeing the kind of benefit loop back up. So I would just encourage people, you're going to go through this zone of disruption. You really then need to get everybody on board at this, what we call the point of decision. And when you're in that point of decision, saying, yes, we are now going to adopt whatever this change is, and then we're going to reap the benefits from it. So just kind of have patience during a change process, recognizing that it gets worse before it gets better. And then ultimately, in the long term, you're going to have far outsized gains. In a way, it goes back to what I was sharing earlier about that quadrant 2 work, the important but not urgent work.
Hmm.
It gets worst first is a saying I like, where you need to focus on the important but not urgent, and knowing that it's going to be hard for a bit, and then in the end it'll be a lot better.
It's kind of like going to the gym, right? And it gets worse for a little while. Like you get up and you ache and you're sore, but eventually you start to adopt and your performance level goes up. I mean, it's so true in
Totally.
that regard. Hey, so I was thinking about, when people are adopting new behaviors and you as a leader are trying to help them through this process of change, we often talk about like the intellectual argument you can make, like here's why this makes sense to do. But then there's this emotional argument you can make, or this ability to at least stay attuned to the emotions of your people. I mean, what have you as a leader learned about the importance of things like emotional intelligence and being able to connect with your people in that regard?
You're saying particularly in the change circumstance, or both?
Yeah. In
Yeah,
the change
yeah.
circumstance specifically, yeah.
So I think it is really important to celebrate small wins and give people that dopamine rush. If you think about um, exercise, you talk about going to the gym, right? Exercise is like a canonical New Year's resolution. And
Hmm.
I think the best part about exercising when you're developing a new exercise habit is, one, when you leave whatever it is, let's say you decide I want to run a half marathon, and you complete your first 5 mile run and you feel that runner's high, you're sweating, you go to dinner that night and you're like, oh my God, I'm allowed to eat anything because I just had a big run. And
Yeah.
that's like a dopamine surge. And then similarly, you're running because you want to lose weight. You step on the scale and you look at the scale and you've lost 5 pounds. And then a couple of days later, somebody says to you, hey, by the way, have you lost weight? Like, you're looking great now. That's another dopamine rush. And that's gonna that those dopamine rushes kind of encourage you to stay on that journey. A lot of times with professional change, you don't have that step on the scale moment. You don't have the person saying, hey, you've lost weight. You don't have the sweating dopamine rush that comes from exercise. And so I think as a leader, it's your job to figure out, how can I celebrate the small wins on this change curve to give somebody the positive affirmations of, yes, continue, continue, continue. Your work is being noticed.
Oh, such a great point, because I think that sometimes, like when we're talking specifically about technology advancements, sometimes when we tell team members, hey, here's how it's going to change, and here's going to be the great new stuff you get to do. Some team members aren't particularly excited about that new stuff they get. Let me give you an example. So I worked on a project a number of years ago when I was teaching at Vanderbilt around process automation, and we were doing it in the accounting and finance world. And the argument was being made, we're going to take a lot of these debit and credit related actions that you typically have historically done as a bookkeeper, and we're going to automate those things, and they're going to move faster and they're going to be more accurate. And that's going to free up your time to do more higher level analytical things. And you could tell as people were hearing this story, some were like, awesome, I love the higher level analytical stuff. And other people are going, wait a minute, I like putting stuff into the debits and credit columns inside this spreadsheet. I mean, how have you learned like how to share the message of the change with people and to figure out like what might excite them about it?
Yeah. I think you get at something important there, which is just empathy and understanding for the person going through the change. So, involve them, engage them in the change process. Understand, what do you like to do? What do you not like to do? What is your career goal and aspiration? What are you striving towards? What are you working for? And putting the change in the context of their life and their lived experience, I think, is important. It could be that the person is like, you know what, I really like doing the debits and credits. And the hard truth is that that work is going to be automated in the future. They're not going to be able to do it. But I bet what they like more than doing debits and credits is, making good money, having an a future-proof career, being able to provide for their family, et cetera. And if you can kind of position it as like, yeah, you're not going to be doing the debit to credit every day, but by doing higher level work and using this technology, you're going to be able to scale and have more impact, and you're going to be able to over time get better roles and make more money, and like position it in both the day-to-day and the change in the day-to-day and the career aspirations of an individual.
It's it's interesting. The other day I was talking to somebody who is feeling a bit of a threat in their own world around AI, because he was saying to me that he's historically done a lot of writing for the company he's at, and recently the CEO of the company did something with ChatGPT or some other tool like that, and produced something kind of in the ballpark of what this guy typically gets paid to do. And his concern was probably pretty valid that he was. And I just asked the question. I said, do you see a world in AI where you actually can make yourself more valuable, not less valuable to the company? And that's all I asked him. And he thought about it for a few moments and started coming up with a plan of how he could do that. And it's probably similar to the one team member on your team who you mentioned was kind of forward thinking in a lot of these tools, right? This gentleman saw that same type of thing. I think sometimes as leaders, it can become really common for us to feel like we need to have the answer. But sometimes the best thing is just to ask a couple decent questions.
Totally, totally, no, 100%. I think that's a great example and great point.
So, Will, putting your hat on as the EVP of product, I was curious to learn from you, like, what are you excited about that's changing in the industry, about what's coming down the pipe, if you will, around developing leaders that the listeners might want to know? Like, these are the types of things that AI and other tools are going to allow us to do.
Absolutely. So I'm going to talk about what I think is changing and then what also isn't changing. What is changing is AI allows for a tremendous amount of personalization at scale. In the past, it would have been prohibitively expensive to create training experiences, courses, solutions for every job function, for every type of company, every size company, every industry, every circumstance. So my manager is a micromanager, my manager is a visionary, whatever the case may be. With AI, we can create this incredibly personalized learning experiences. And so I think that is a powerful opportunity, and we're starting to bake those in. At FranklinCovey, we've built an AI coach. The AI coach is personalized to the individual, so it knows what size company you work at, it knows how long you've worked there, what your team looks like, things along those lines. So all of that is great. What isn't changing though is we are still focused on building uh, exceptionally moving experiences that we still believe that for the foreseeable future, you will have a group of people getting together, whether that's in person or they're getting together virtually, and they are going through emotionally powerful, resonant learning experiences that get them to really evaluate and investigate who they are as an individual, how they think as a leader, and then the behaviors they do day to day. I still think that we are going to have people that want to get together for those powerful learning experiences, because I think that human vulnerability, that shared human experience unlocks the way that people think about themselves as a leader and unlocks their kind of development journey as a result. So I think some things are going to really change in the product world, and a lot of things I think will still have similar to the past.
When you think about those powerful emotional experiences and that you just mentioned there, do you think that there's actually potential? I don't know if to say have more of those, but to have those actually be more meaningful in certain ways because of what other things might be just not needed to be handled because technology will help us do that. Does that make sense to me? Is there something
Totally.
about that aspect? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the technology will automate a lot of our work, and it'll free us up to do more of the kind of uniquely and innately human parts of what we do. One big part of that is connecting with others. And so I think that there will hopefully be more space in the future. Earlier today, I was on with a group of about 50 or so employees at FranklinCovey, where we were talking about how people are using AI, and people were sharing. If somebody shared the kind of anxiety of, oh man, is AI going to replace my job? Similar to the example you gave earlier, Patrick. And I said, I don't think it's going to replace your job, but I think it'll replace parts of your job. I think that 30% of what you do will probably be replaced by technology. That is not new. We've had technological waves over the course of the last 50 years that have replaced parts of what people do. And it frees you up to do the things that you are uniquely capable of doing. And so I think that it will create space for some of that interpersonal connection and dynamic that only a human could provide.
Yeah, I'm always trying to sort out in my mind. I've been talking to a few people recently about AI to try to figure out, we always think there's the uniqueness of our time, right? Oh, this is the unique moment, but tell that to the person who was making buggies back in the 1800s, or tell that to, somebody pre-industrial age or even pre-knowledge worker age. We see those changes. Do you think there are some aspects that are truly unique about this, or is it just hey, this is when we are living?
I do think that there are aspects that are unique. I think that it is a substantial, significant, meaningful advancement over any technological advance we've had previously because of the opportunity for reasoning, creativity, thinking in a way. Um, so it's not just that it can automate rote work, like, an Excel spreadsheets automate doing math, but so I think it is a meaningful change, but I also agree with you that it doesn't mean that all work is going to be automated, at least not in the next, 5, 10 years, I don't think. But yeah. So I think that there will be meaningful change, but it's not going to eliminate everything or anything that dramatic.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, when you say 5, 10 years, I was thinking about like looking ahead 10 years, for example. We'll put on your what do you call it? The predictive hat. I guess.
Prognosticator hat?
That's the
Yeah.
one. That's the one I was going for. It just didn't come out of my mouth at that moment. Yeah. So looking ahead 10 years or so, what do you believe will be the defining characteristic of somebody that's a resilient, kind of future ready individual? Will it continue to be this curiosity and this learning mindset and this adoption to technology, or what do you see 10 years from now somebody should be marching toward?
I think it's a pretty safe bet. And I don't want to be too dystopian or worrying or whatnot. I think there's a world in 10 years from now, we've reached AGI, artificial general intelligence, and the world of work looks dramatically different from it does today. Back when I was at Google early in my career, I remember when they launched what's now called Waymo, was kind of self-driving cars originally,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a line that was popularly quoted internally that we overestimate how much technology will change over the course of 1 to 2 years, and we underestimate how much it'll change over the course of a decade. And so
Yeah.
I do think 10 years from now might look very, very different from how it does today. But I think that the core principle of no matter what the world looks like, being intellectually curious, having a growth mindset, embracing technology, and kind of leaning into the work that is innately human seems like the most resilient path we can go down.
Oh, that's so brilliant. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that at the end. I think that's so true. That's a pretty guaranteed good path to go down going forward. Well, Will, we so appreciate you joining us today for this conversation. It's actually a very powerful conversation about how do you, upskill your team and make sure you have the right mindset yourself moving forward. And thanks to everybody who's listening. If you're interested in more information about how to navigate disruption, schedule a keynote of mine called Disrupt Everything. It's based on my groundbreaking research at Vanderbilt University and the book of the same title that the author James Patterson and I co-wrote together and have partnered with FranklinCovey on. You can use that to not just survive disruptive moments, but to be kind of cliche, but so truthful, to thrive and succeed through them. So for more details about that, check out the show notes for the link. And thank you again for joining us. And Will, thank you so much for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Glad to be part of the conversation. Really excited about the book coming out and the work we're doing and the work that you're leading on. So thank you.
I am too. And thanks everybody. My name's Dr. Patrick Gledden. Now go make it a great day.